I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here in the Hub Pavilion in Davos. I'm very pleased now to be joined by David Kirkpatrick. He's written a new book called The Facebook Effect, and you're also starting a conference, Techonomy. Tell me first of all why you're here in Davos.
Well, I'm a tech journalist for 25 years, and about 13 years ago I started coming to Davos, and I found that it's probably the best place that I've been in my career for two things. For three things for me, really. Number one, actually for me, the single biggest impact it's had is giving me a more global view of everything. Because as an American, starting to come to Davos years ago, I was very parochial in much of my thinking. And coming here all these years has really opened me up to a lot of the realities of how non-American we need to think. Number two, I really want to understand what's happening, and the people who come here are many of the people who make it happen. So you really do learn a lot of the latest ideas and thinking here. And let's face it, it is the consummate networking opportunity, and I have taken advantage of that for many years with great effect.
Tell me about your book, The Facebook Effect. Very, obviously, topical. We've had Facebook in here today. Tell me why you wrote this book, and tell me a little bit about it.
Well, the book's full title is The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that is connecting the world. And I am a tech journalist. I wrote about the internet and technology for Fortune for a long time. And in 2006, I met Mark Zuckerberg right at the height of the famous newsfeed controversy, which was the biggest protest Facebook had ever faced from its own members. And when I met Mark in September of '06, I was immediately amazingly impressed with his presence of mind, his strategic thinking, his focus, his non-business attitude towards building a business. I found it all fascinating. I liked him a lot. I wrote a piece at the time called Why Facebook Matters, which got a lot of attention because at that point in '06, very few business press people had really made statements like that. Facebook was still perceived as a student thing. And, I kind of got on their radar that way, and Mark and I established a relationship, and then when they did their platform in '07, I was invited in as the only journalist beforehand to do an inside story of why they did it, and it came out the minute the doors opened to F8. And ever since then, I've really just paid very, very close attention to Facebook. And January of '08, here at Davos, I was with Mark, talking to him, and I said, Mark, I really feel like I want to write a book about your company. And he said, go for it. And initially, what I was going to write was, why Facebook matters, right? And it was the Facebook Effect title, kind of, which has been the title all along, implied, the effect that Facebook has in the world, which is a big part of the book. But once I started getting into it and found the degree of cooperation I was receiving from Mark and the company, I realized I had the opportunity to tell the definitive story of this company, which I have now done. So it really is the inside story of Facebook. And some people ask about the other book, The Accidental Billionaires, which is frankly a pretty irresponsible effort at taking on this topic and very thinly reported. That's not really the story, and it's only the first year, but even the first year it gets wrong. I have the real story from its inception, really even the history of social networking up to Facebook, to the present with a heavy forward spin. I have a long section at the end comparing Facebook to Google and looking at how they look at each other and why that's a very big confrontation going forward, et cetera, et cetera.
So tell me about Facebook versus Google and very different, but obviously incredibly integrated. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we should talk, before we finish, about why Facebook matters, because that's a big one. But, if you look at the difference between Facebook and Google, Google's mandate is to search all the world's information, all. That means everything about you, your social security number, your address, your phone number, that technically all includes all. Now, Facebook's always had a fundamentally different view than really almost any web service that ever existed, or almost any service, which is it's fundamentally based on identity. You can't really use Facebook effectively without using your real name. And also, it has had privacy controls built in from the beginning. So while much of your information is accessible and exposed, Facebook's gotten plenty of criticism about that. In reality, it is the only service that has ever existed that gives you anything comparable to the degree of control that you have on Facebook about who sees your data. That is very poorly understood, even by the hundreds of millions of people who use it. They just use it and they don't realize that, in fact, they are very pleased to be able to be friends with you, but not with my mother, theoretically, right? Or, my daughter, who's friends with 800 people in high school in New York, but not with me, because she doesn't want me to see what she's telling all those 800 high school kids. That's very different than Google. So going forward, You know, Google has Street View, for example. You know, what do they want to do? When they want to like do a map, they drive a truck with a camera by your house.
I saw
Facebook doesn't do that. Facebook basically asks your permission before it exposes any information about you. Now, they try to convince you to say, I want everybody to see my data. That's where people get confused, and they really do. That was controversial even in recent months. But in reality, they do give you that control. It's a fundamental difference, and going forward, I think that distinction is going to be felt more and more powerfully.
It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, David. I really appreciate you taking the time to
Thank you
come
for
to
asking
us,
good
come in
questions.
here to the Hub Pavilion in Davos, and I'm Edie Lash.